Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Ali Salim's play, The Comedy of Oedipus, or You're the One Who Killed the Beast. So this is another Egyptian adaptation of the Oedipus story, obviously, from somewhat later than Al-Hakim and Bakhatir's versions. This is from 1970. And Salim is very interested in the question of democracy. So, along with this question does arise the same issue that we see in Al-Hakim and Bakhatir's versions of the Oedipus story, which is the issue of good rulers who are led astray in some way by bad counselors. So again, this is something that's very, very central to actually a lot of contemporary Arabic drama, Middle Eastern drama, but it's something we see across Arabic adaptations of Western plays, not only from the Greeks, but we also see it frequently in adaptations of Shakespeare. But Salim is very, very interested in democracy. So basically, in this version, what happens is slightly different than what we get in previous versions. But again, the focus is more on the contest between Oedipus and the Sphinx than it is on sort of Oedipus killing his father, marrying his mother, uncovering that whole thing. Which actually doesn't come up in the play at all. Like, we don't ever find out Oedipus's origins. All we know is he's a person living in Thebes who's from somewhere else. But the Sphinx is threatening Thebes. And a bunch of people, professors from the university, etc., go out and try and solve the riddle to defeat the beast. And they all fail. They all get eaten. So Oedipus basically extracts a promise that if he defeats the Sphinx, if he defeats the beast, he'll be made king of Thebes. And one of the interesting things about this is that he insists on a sort of democratic kingship, because the council agrees for him to be king. And Oedipus says, and the people? And Awalia, who I'll talk more about in just a minute, says, what have the people to do with it? We are the authority. And Oedipus says, it must be the people who agree to my appointment. You're capable of appointing me today and dismissing me tomorrow. But if the people appoint me, no one will know how to dismiss me. People of Thebes, do you agree? So we've got this model of kingship, which is, it vests power in the people, but it's a sort of representative democracy approach. The people of Thebes are choosing Oedipus to be their representative, their king, their pharaoh, whatever it is. This is contrasted by a competing model of democracy, or maybe more accurately, a competing model of collectivism promoted by Tiresias. And what he says, people, good people, wait. What is this you're doing? What are you doing? It may well be that Oedipus will solve the riddle and settle the problem of the beast, but what of the beast within you? Who is going to kill that stupid beast that makes you forever wait for one who will solve your problems for you, in return for which you will concede him anything? And so this becomes one of the two, I think, central problems of democracy in the play, is this competition between these two ideas of democracy. The representative structure of democracy, in which Oedipus is chosen by the people and he becomes really a sort of all-powerful ruler appointed with the consent of the governed, And then you have Tiresias's idea in which the people collectively are responsible for themselves. So this is an alternative view, something more akin to direct democracy than to representative democracy. Tiresias argues that the people must be responsible for themselves. They must be the source of decision-making, and they must be the ones who carry out the decisions. And this becomes increasingly important as the play goes on. And actually, in Act 3, the final act of the play, Oedipus comes around to this perspective. He comes around to Tiresias's way of thinking, because Oedipus knows, unlike everyone else, that he didn't actually answer the riddle, he didn't actually defeat the beast, but when he returned to the city after going out to confront the beast, because he came back alive, the people assumed that he had, and so they made him king. And he brings all these great innovations. Like this is supposed to be some version of ancient Thebes in Egypt, not Greece. So that's one change that Salim does make. But Oedipus introduces like cars and phones and TV and things like this. So he introduces these innovations, these mechanical, technological discoveries that are thousands of years ahead of their time. So he's an excellent king, but when it comes to defeating the beast, and again, the beast is this sort of symbolic representation of this desire to have a leader who solves all the problems. It's almost this populist desire that the beast represents. And so Oedipus, when the beast returns, Oedipus says, "People of Thebes, in the name of life I ask you to go out and confront the beast and do away with it. For your own sakes, for the sakes of those who will follow, for the sake of Thebes." And Tiresias, again, backs this idea up. He says, the people must undertake their own defense against the beast. If there is to be a struggle, let the people go out and fight in its own defense. So, again, it's this collective ethos, this collective impetus that... And this is, I think, important in the context of Egyptian history, modern Egyptian history, because from the late 50s up through, actually I think up through 1970, the year that this play premiered, though I'm not 100% sure on the dates on this, Egypt was mostly ruled by Gamal Abdel Nasser, who... he's one of those figures where there are very divided opinions on what to make of him. He definitely helped modernize Egypt. He definitely increased the quality of life for a lot of Egyptians, but he wasn't necessarily a totalitarian ruler, but he was pretty dictatorial. So you have those two competing impulses, but because of some things that Nasser did early in his rule, particularly the nationalization of the Suez Canal and working toward a pan-Arab state, Nasser was revered among not just Egyptians, but Middle Easterners, North Africans, Arabs, etc., etc. And so this is one of the things that Salim is critiquing here, is this willingness to appoint a strongman political ruler who promises to solve all of the country's problems. And so that's a big issue for Salim. And he instead wants power genuinely to be vested in the people. But the other component here, the other problem that Salim identifies is, again, this issue of good rulers who are led astray by bad counselors. And we see that again in both Al-Hakim and Bakhatir's versions of the Oedipus story. In particular, this is Awaliya. Although the other members of the council are problematic as well, Awaliya is the most problematic character, the chief of police. So the people of Thebes fail to defeat the beast. They fail to defeat the Sphinx. And the reason, according to Tiresias, that they fail is because they are fearful. They're imbued with fear, not of the beast, but from within Theban society itself. Because, as he says to Oedipus, you were liberating him on the one hand, and others were, the him in this case is the people of Thebes. You were liberating him on the one hand, and others were imprisoning him in fear on the other. To all appearances, your majesty, what is that Awaliya up to? So this, I mean, in this case, Tiresias is asking whether or not Oedipus knows what Awaliya, his chief of police, has been doing, which has been imprisoning people, torturing people, even murdering people that Awaliya deems to be political enemies. And this is a largely arbitrary process. It's even bureaucratized in the sense that Awaliya has lists of people who are just, in general, regarded as political enemies. So some of the names came from the previous king. Some of them Awaliya has gotten. These lists are just sort of passed down from father to son in this position of chief of police. And so we see that sort of use of fear as a tool for controlling the populace. The other thing that we see as a tool for controlling the populace is religious ideology, and education as well, which is working hand in hand with this religious ideology. The ideology that Oedipus as a pharaoh is a god and is therefore unassailable in his judgment. But Awaliya in particular, we have this interesting scene 4 of Act 2, where Jocasta, who's unhappy with Oedipus as the king, basically asks Awaliya to have him secretly murdered, as apparently Awaliya has done with numerous previous monarchs. But Awaliya says, but with Oedipus the situation's different. The people are the ones who appointed him. So in this case, he has to tread somewhat more carefully with surreptitiously murdering a ruler. But he does have a solution to Jocasta's problem. He says, my task will be to add to the number of people who hate him. Of course, you know the rest. And Jocasta says, how are you going to make people hate him? Awaliya says, nothing to it. It's simple. I shall make them love him by force. So, this idea of using state force, using violence, using the police force and the military, etc., to enforce fidelity to an unquestioned ruler is a central problem of the play, because it undermines Oedipus's democratic objectives, and it's only when Awaliya is expelled from the city that the people of Thebes can start moving toward a more genuine collective democracy.